I'm Persian as my background, and in our culture, we have a tradition of divination, which is fortune telling, which is a terrible word because it has such negative connotations in the West, but it's part of our tradition. And my grandmother used to do it, and my mom does it. And I was a scientist, so I didn't really believe in it, but my mom would do it for me. And I noticed that she would predict things like ahead of time, really specific, weird things that I would have no idea were coming, that she would have things that were like, let's say, related to work that I wouldn't update her. So she doesn't even know what I do. She still doesn't know what I do. So like she would have no way of even knowing what was going on. And that kind of what happened was some of her predictions were related to some of the things that started crashing around me. And I started getting and that I think that probably contributed. I started feeling like I didn't understand the universe, and I had gone into science to understand the world, understand and control. That's what a lot of scientists go into science for. And so then my sense of understanding and control started to unravel because I was like, I don't understand how this could be possible. And so I lived in cognitive dissonance for as long as I could until, like I said, life just kept coming at me. And I finally broke and it went into like a dark, I felt despair for the first time. And then I lost hope. And I was not this kind of person. Like I was very upbeat and optimistic. And then that's when I started to explore. And it wasn't even willingly, it was like bit by bit. People around me were like, let's take you to a psychic in LA because I live in LA and my friends had been. And I was like, that's ridiculous. I'm not going to do that. But then I went because I was like, oh, it sounds like entertainment. It'll be fun. And they blew my mind. But of course, I was still skeptical for a very long time. And so I started looking into it and finding that there had been research on it, that this is like something that's been happening in humanity for as long as we've existed. And as much as Western culture has this story that we've debunked these primitive or primal or third world practices, it's not true. Actually, a lot of, Western culture's first-rate science has proved that there's something there. So once I found that, I mean, you can imagine the identity crisis and like
Yeah,
existential
yeah.
crisis part two that ensued because my whole identity and self-worth was built around being a scientist, a serious scientist. And so that was a nightmare. But I kept interviewing people and reading and exploring and realized then I got to the whole literature on, oh, Western culture has adopted a physicalist, materialist worldview, but it's not the only worldview. There's a lot of other worldviews that include, the idea that maybe something like our consciousness is an energy that pervades the whole universe, and so that matter and physical matter is not the only thing, which we already know from physics, actually. So I started to explore these ideas, and I realized, actually what they teach us in science, because they teach you that there's no external meaning in the world, that our brains create all the meaning, and we look for coincidences. And then our brains create stories around the data points, which is true. Our brains do that, but that worldview in the West is that that's all there is. That we create meaning in stories and these, magical thinking based on our brains, but that there's not actually anything there in the external world, and that everything is meaningless and pointless, and that, or like the universe has no meaning, so everything is up to you to find meaning. And that is a very depressing worldview. But I didn't know that that was my worldview, or that there were other worldviews, or, like you're so in it, you don't even know that it's a thing. And
Yeah.
so once I started learning about that, I thought, oh, I don't have to have this worldview. I could believe that the universe is meaningful the way that most of humanity has believed for the time that we've been on Earth. And I could believe that we're in relationship with the universe and in conversation with it. I could believe that the universe is made of some sort of substance that has intelligence. I don't like the word God, but whatever source, like we came from somewhere or something. It's like I could believe whatever I want because as I looked into the evidence, there was possibility for all of that. Like nothing had been proven. No one had proved only physical matter exists. No one had proved spirituality isn't real. No one had proved that the universe doesn't have intelligence, because you can't prove those things. So once I explored all of that, I was like, oh, all these people, like my old self, talking in certainty about what the universe is or isn't, we don't know what we're talking about. like there's a lot of possibility. And that immediately alleviated a lot of existential pain, like immediately, just the idea that there were all these other possibilities.